Hey guys, Steve Washington here. So over the years, I've been fortunate enough to learn that the key really to success is to have mentors, right? So my mentors have come in many different forms. Many of my mentors came in the form of just books, in the form of authors who I've never met, probably will never meet. But the beautiful thing about a book is you get to experience somebody outpouring their entire life or their entire philosophy, their entire ideas into a concise paperback form, for 10, 15, $20, that sort of thing. And I've also had the opportunity to have real life mentors as well to be able to pour into me, share, wealth principles, secret wisdom on a variety of topics. But today we're talking about the topic of just, how to become actually wealthy, right? And one of the consistent themes, which I've found is how do I put it? I found that that's when you start hearing something over and over again from different sources that, don't know each other, not interconnected, it's a good chance that you might be dealing with a truth there, right? And one of the principles that I've consistently heard and had to begin experiencing for myself is the principle of if you actually want to become wealthy, it is going to require you to have courage, to be courageous. And, for many of you that might be listening to this, at least I know for me, like that's not an easy thing to just conjure up, right? You can't just one day just decide, you know, I am courageous. I mean, I guess you can, whatever, but it's not the easiest task. So at the end, I'm gonna share some secrets on how to become courageous. But if you have any plans or expectations of becoming wealthy, becoming financially free, you are going to have to figure out how to establish courage in your life. And the five key areas of where that courage I feel like are needed are as follows. Uh, you have to have the courage to just try something new. I speak to a lot of people who want change and they want something different in their life, right? They want a different result, but they really are resistant to doing something different, to doing something new. And something new is hard for everybody, right? Because it's new, and it's uncomfortable. And depending on the type of person you are, some people are like a lot easier with that sort of thing, and then some people are quite resistant. And I can understand that. I probably fall on a more resistant side of I like simple. I like the way it was yesterday. My wife and I would go out to dinner, a lot, and uh, the topic will come up of, well, what am I going to get? And then she kind of snickers and jokes, knowing that if I've been to that restaurant before, oftentimes I get the same thing. Um, but I say that to say when it comes to wealth building, like we have to be willing. If we want to get somewhere different than where we are, we have to be willing to try something new. Okay, so that's principle number one. Principle number two is delayed gratification. Right? We all live in this society, this microwave society, where we want something right away. We want something quickly. We don't want to put it on a slow cooker, right? We want it like right now, and we all feel that way, right? Like there's nothing wrong with that desire. The problem is sometimes when our desires don't match up with reality, and the reality is if we do plan on getting in this wealth building arena, if you will, you are going to have to be willing to have delayed gratification. That can come in the form of saving funds. That can come in a form of not spending your money on different things. That can come in a form of maybe you do invest in a business or in a piece of real estate or in, even your education or what have you. It doesn't always just turn around like right away in the next month or the next week, sometimes even the next year. But that is a wealth principle of delayed gratification. Unfortunately, there's nothing that we can do about it, right? Except get started. Because the sooner we get started, the sooner we can, actually receive the results. One of the principles of becoming wealthy is uh, being willing to experience ridicule, right? Um, Nobody particularly likes it, right? I mean, I guess maybe there's some. I know I don't. I would rather people uh, be okay with everything I'm doing. Would cheer me on? I think that's a great idea on whatever it is that I'm doing. But I found that consistently, both in my life, on the life of my mentors, and so forth. The life of anybody who's really experienced any level of success, you'll find over and over again that, especially in the beginning, tremendous amount of ridicule, tremendous amount of doubt. That doesn't mean you should just go rogue and just, not take good wisdom, right? But when you've done the research, when you've done the, investigated the thing, looked into the thing, and feel like this is one of your best opportunities in front of you, and maybe some of the ridicule that you're being given isn't also coming with a better, piece of wisdom that you can feel from your heart. You have to be willing to experience it and be willing to accept that that's the way people will feel about it and move on. I know, I buy a lot of properties all across the country, not just in my home market. I actually don't buy any properties in my home market. It's just a little bit more competitive. And so there are some areas that I buy in. Some of my realtors, God bless them, love them. But when I told them that I was looking to buy property in this area or that area, I mean, literally, they all but said, "Hey, Steven, you're stupid." And look, I respect it. Everybody's got their position, their ideas, their thought, and uh, you know, there is a such thing as absolute truth, but then there is also a such thing as like I don't know, like a perspective or a perspective, right? And so, meaning for them, it would be stupid, right? So they're not lying. They're saying that this is stupid for them, but it may not be stupid for you. And many of those same agents, and sometimes even family members and friends who ridiculed me on different things. Again, God bless them. I'm sure it was hopefully out of good intentions, right? Have now come around and say, you know what, tell me more about this thing, right? And so you have to be willing to experience ridicule on your road to wealth. The next thing is taking risk, right? Uh, in a perfect world, if we lived in a vacuum, none of us would take risk, right? But we have to. Like that's just unfortunately that's something that we can't avoid because none of us know the future, and so it's important that we take educated risk. Now, I'm not a put all chips on black and wish for the best sort of thing. But once you've educated yourself and once you've read up on it and maybe got mentors and built a network and done different things, whatever path it is that you're looking to make a decision on, at some point you do have to jump in the pool. I have this. Once I realized this risk thing a little while ago, and once I realized that, like, hey, when you want to jump in a pool, like, it's always going to be cold at first, and then it warms up. And so, literally, in the physical, like, whenever it is that I'm getting in a pool, I never like walk down the steps. I never like back in. It's always jump in, just to kind of always remind myself that that's just the way it works, right? So you have to be willing to take risks. Next one is you have to be willing to fail, right? And that's probably like one of the hardest ones because none of us wants to fail, right? None of us wants to feel like we're just wasting our time or wasting our money, especially when we feel like we don't have a lot of time or a lot of money to even risk in the first place, right? And I get that. Here's a problem. Um, it's a gentleman, I'm trying to remember his name, Ray Dalio. He wrote an excellent book called Principles. And he talks about in that book about how it's just overwhelmingly important that we stay in touch with reality, right? He says that like if you ever want to be successful in anything, you have to take a position of like extreme reality. In other words, just facing the facts, facing the truth. There's nobody who we look up to or honor or think like, man, they did such an amazing thing who didn't experience failure. Nobody. Babe Ruth, they say he's a home run king, strikeout king. And I mean it's just all across the board in sports, in business, in any sort of pursuits, so forth and so on. Um, it's just a reality, right? And so every failure doesn't have to be a devastation. And really, depending on what you do with that failure, nobody talks about Jeff Bezos and the failures that he has. All we talk about is Amazon and the wins. But if you ask him, if you read his books or biographies and things like that, tons of failures. And I just use him as an example. So that would be the fifth principle. I want to leave you guys with two secrets, right? I told you guys I would. So the challenge is You're saying, but hey, but Stephen, I don't have courage. Maybe you've already tried something that hasn't worked so well, right? That you failed in, or you tried something and not only did you fail, but then your family and friends they ridiculed you or whatever. Or maybe you're just saying to yourself like, look, I'm just absolutely terrified of that, right? Um, there's a scripture in the Bible where Jesus is given the Lord's Prayer, and he says, give us this day our daily bread, right? And if you think about that for a little bit, it's like, you know, you would think, at least if it were up to me, if I were deciding on how the Lord's Prayer would look, it would look like, give me today like the bread for like the next 20 years, right? You think about in the Old Testament stories of children of Israel, they were going through, you know, the uh, the desert, and they didn't have food, and the Lord provided them manna, certain type of food every single day, right? Except for the weekends, it was a little different. But it's like, well, if it were me, it's like, no, look, let's bring that manna for the month. Let's bring that manna for the year. Let's bring that manna for the 10 years, And it's like, but there's something about humanity and the way we are and the way we work that really we can kind of only handle a day, like one day at a time, right? And so I think a lot of times it's hard for us to take action when we're like, okay, well, what am I going to do when this happens? Well, what am I going to do, 5 years down the road, whatever this project it is that you're thinking about, what am I going to do if this comes up? And it's like, it's a great question. I don't know. But if I asked you, well, how are you going to deal with just today? Right? I mean, think about anything. Think about, if I ask somebody like, hey, look, maybe cut your calories or, eat low carb or do this or do that uh, for a month. That may be a hard task to ask somebody, right? But if you say, hey, look, are you willing to do it for could you, is it possible that you could do it for just a day, just today, and then tomorrow we'll see what happens? It's very achievable for a lot of people. You know what I mean? And when you ask somebody to do something for just one day, focus on just today, today only, tends to be far more achievable, ask versus the long run out. And so I say that to say, when it comes to taking courage, right? Like, I don't need you to say, man, how do I have the courage to do everything and to get through all of the obstacles and all of the challenges and all the things that might come up, right? It's a big ask. And I don't have that, whatever, right? But I think what we can figure out is, all right, how do I have the courage to get through today? So maybe you need to research something. Okay, how do I have the courage just to research this part? And then after you do the research, then maybe it's talking to someone. Or how do I have the courage just to make one phone call, two phone calls? Maybe you need to email someone. Maybe you need to purchase something. You get the concept. Don't you can't take it. How am I going to do this whole entire project? A project is simply made up of a ton of individual tasks. So I'm saying, hey, can you have the courage to do the one task, not to do the whole project, but to do the one task? And then, depending on how that goes, then, hey, how do I get the courage to do the second task? Does that make sense? Hope it makes sense. Um, and then the last secret that I'll give on this, and this really was something that I had to learn when I started buying properties out of state, right? Because when I was buying properties local, properties that I could drive to, and properties that, if God forbid there was some sort of catastrophe, I could just run over there, or, call my brother, or, something to that effect. But when I'm buying properties 6, 7, 800 miles away, that's where the rubber meets the road for real. And, I, literally, I began to be concerned about a lot of those properties, especially at night, because I would be saying to myself, like, man, what if this happens? I would have vacancies, say, on some of the properties. I'm like, well, what if somebody's breaking into my property right now? What if somebody's stealing the pipes? What if the pipes are bursting? It's the winter or something. What if all of these what ifs? And literally, it began to haunt me. And it's like, well, I was saying to myself, like, man, on one end, I really want to be in business. The opportunities, the better opportunities for me and for my business model were, hundreds of miles from my area. So I couldn't get there personally. And so I'm like, man, but and it wasn't that I was even experiencing all these things. That's the way the mind works. So messed up, right? It wasn't even that I was even experiencing all these pipe bursts or vacancies or people breaking in. Like I wasn't honestly really experiencing much of any of it. Um, but the what ifs were like really beginning to haunt me. And then one day, I think I was reading something and it just kind of connected with me. And I just kind of had the thought that, like, wait a minute, am I resourceful enough that when a situation does arise, that I can figure it out, right? So because in my mind, I wanted to figure out how I could prepare for every single situation, and I think the main ones you should, right? I think you should like, you know, uh, pipes in the Northeast, for example, Northeast of the country, it gets very cold in the winter, right? And so pipes can expand and burst if the heat's not on and if water's not running and all the things. So it's like, no, you should prepare for the things that you can prepare for. But then there are some things that it's a million just what ifs, right? And I had to say to myself, like, Stephen, are you resourceful enough that if something happens, you don't know what it is yet, but that it's probably a good chance that you can do something to figure it out, to either totally solve the problem or to make the problem, you know, uh, minimal enough that it can make sense and that you can continue to do business out of the area. And I had to come to grips with that. And it's been very successful for us. And honestly, all that haunting has overwhelmingly been put to bed because of, hey, am I willing to be resourceful enough when a situation does arise to deal with that individual situation? Because I mean, it's not going to just rain and pour every single worst case scenario all at one time. Like that's extremely rare, right? Um, but can you just handle one situation at a time if and when it comes? And I think for most of us, we can. So those are some thoughts for today. Hope you guys found some value in it. Feel free to like, share, and then honestly, if you have any questions at all, if you want me to expound on something, if you want to, add some specifics or whatever, feel free to put it in the comments. I'll be happy to answer. All right, have a great day.